because I feel like every time there is some kind of complication.
Yeah.
That's good in our way.
Thankfully, straight most
Yes. Well,
but not really.
welcome, Christy Holt, our happiness hussy. We are super excited to have a conversation with you about authenticity, which you have told us is the secret to happy and healthy relationships. And so we want to know all about that. But first, we'd love if you could take a minute or two to introduce yourself to our audiences if they don't know who you are yet, and let them know what you're up to in the world, because it's pretty fucking awesome.
Yeah. So for anybody who I haven't had the chance to have a conversation with yet, I'm Christy, and I call myself the happiness hussy. It kind of came sort of by accident that my cousin teasingly called me a happiness hussy, like, oh, you happiness hussy, you. And I was like, fuck yes. Going to claim that, running all the way from here until forever with that one. It's just super fun and really encompasses the mission that I have in the world, which is to help people create a life and love that feels really amazing, right? To really embody this experience of happiness, because I don't believe it's something that you have to find out there. It's something that's cultivated from within. And so I'm really passionate and on this mission to help as many people as possible to discover what they have within themselves so that they can be truly fucking happy.
I love that. And it's so empowering too, when you recognize that it like comes from within, because you don't have to wait then. And happiness is like what we're all after ultimately, right? Like all of the outside of us things that we want to have happen, we want it because we think it's going to make us happy. And oftentimes we're surprised because it's not, or it falls short of those expectations. And so that you're helping people recognize like how to cultivate that here, regardless of what's going on around there, is huge.
Yeah, it's like a superpower.
It is.
Yeah. And you know, all of those pursuits outside of yourself, you may feel happy for a moment,
right?
Short term. It's always fleeting when you're looking to the wrong places, right? Because that is not true happiness. That is just, you know, essentially a momentary pleasure. And so oftentimes we are missing the depth of happiness available to us because we're chasing these little limited temporary short-term bursts of what we think is happiness, and considering the understanding of what happiness truly is, because happiness is actually our intended state. And in fact, the more we're pursuing all of these things outside of ourselves and chasing the next hit, the next, you know, dopamine hit, or, you know, experience that lifts us up, or, you know, the next money in our bank, whatever it might be for you, we all have our vices. The more you can realize that, in fact, your state of happiness is there waiting for you all along. It's just that the rest of that is actually distracting you and keeping you from experiencing it. And every time things don't go exactly the way that you planned, right, you end up suffering. But that is essentially an illusion. That is a distraction from the happiness that is that home base within you. And so how can we like strip away, essentially, is the question, all that pain and suffering, so that we can live in that intended state of happiness? And you might use a different word. Maybe you like the word joy. Maybe you like the word peace. Maybe you like the word love. To me, it's kind of all the same. It feels really fucking good. And so whatever that, you know, particular word and language is very interesting, and it means different things to different people. So, you know, just coming to that state that feels really correct for you.
So before we get into authenticity in particular, or maybe it's a segue, but can you connect what you're just saying to people's experiences in their relationship? Because that's where my mind is going when we're talking about like chasing the happiness high. What do you see about how that shows up in our relationships?
Well, Jen, I don't know if I have time to go into that live, but you know, it's a topic that I talk about on my podcast, and I tackle little bits and pieces of it on a regular basis. So I'll mention a few things here today, but obviously I welcome any listeners to go and check out Create Your Happy, because the entirety of season 3 is dedicated to sort of diving into how to create happiness in your relationships. And it is essentially dispelling these myths, these illusions, these traps, these tricks, these things that we believe are going to bring us happiness that don't. They serve as a distraction. They serve as a pure illusion, and they really are preventing you from having what is rightfully yours. So, for example, to throw a couple of ideas out there, and these are some topics that I have covered on the show. Perfectionism, expecting perfectionism out of someone else or expecting things to look a perfect way is an illusion and will prevent you from actually having the experience that you want. People pleasing is something I talk about on a regular basis. And people get upset when I say this, but people pleasing is a form of emotional manipulation. Not because you're a jerk, not because you're doing it on purpose to hurt other people. And in fact, the intention is generally one of, wanting to be nice, wanting to other people to be happy, wanting to avoid conflict, wanting to have things go well. And it's inauthentic.
Right.
And it prevents you from actually having that deep, loving connection that you're trying to create with those behaviors. When we show up wearing masks, which we do when we're worried about perfectionism or people pleasing, right? We actually prevent people from seeing the real us.
Okay.
It's not that we're like trying to be completely disingenuous. I think there's a variety of places on the authentic spectrum, right? You're not going to be the same version of authentic with every single person. It's not safe to. So I'm not necessarily proposing that you go bare your soul to everybody on the internet. But if you want to create truly meaningful, healthy, loving relationships, you do have to step out a little bit into the vulnerability, because it is by stripping away those masks and stripping away all of those illusions and ideas of perfection, which is illusion. Who's perfect? Nobody. What are we even going for here anyways, people? So it's, by stripping that away and showing up as authentically ourselves. This means having healthy boundaries, right? That is part and parcel with being authentic. You can't just show up and say, well, this is me, but I don't have any boundaries. Bullshit, right? That's part of you being you and expressing to the people around you what you need and what you require to maintain connection with them. It's actually an invitation rather than a wall. It's an invitation into deeper connection and deeper knowledge, intimacy. And when this is a whole episode on my podcast, so I'm not going to go much deeper than that, but a lot of people do have confusion. They think it's something that you do to keep people out, to stop poor behavior. And that's not quite right. So anyways, that's a whole topic on my podcast that took about half an hour to go into. So we won't go down that road. But all that to say, the more real you are, the more authentic you are, the more fully expressed you are, the more in alignment you're going to see the relationships and experiences that you're having to be, right? And there is a huge link between authenticity and happiness, which obviously that's why I said it's the secret. Because if you're not being authentically yourself, you are literally efforting and doing and performing and doing all of these things in an attempt to create something outside of yourself that, again, will never be created out there. It's an inside job. And so really coming back to this authenticity is how you can start to create things from this space that actually is that space of happiness. It means that you are going to start creating healthy, aligned, loving relationships. You'll have the clarity of this is for me, or this definitely isn't for me. And with that clarity, you'll know exactly what to do, right? You'll know exactly what steps to take and exactly which relationships are going to work and which ones are not. You're going to be able to discern which ones you're safe to be yourself with, right? Those people who actually are accepting versus maybe other people who aren't so happy and are projecting their shit all over, right? Because that makes it really hard. And when you can start to identify, like, actually, that's not aligned for me, as I did in my past relationship, it just became more and more clear. This is not aligned for me. And I had to do something different. I chose myself. I worked on myself and I found this place of happiness within myself. And then lo and behold, like fucking magic, I met the most incredible human who had no intention of changing me. He was confident and accepting of himself. He knew he was already whole. I knew I was already whole. I was accepting of myself, flaws and all, right? Which requires a certain level of real acceptance and really like allowing yourself, right? It's an unattachment to society's expectations and the measurements of performance. And again, this kind of comes back to the people pleasing a little bit, because we have been conditioned to show up and perform in order to what we think we're going to get is this love and acceptance and validation from other people. And the truth is that's not a trustworthy source to be seeking those things from. And it's always going to fall short, especially, and here's where this secret really, really ties in, especially when you're not actually being completely, honestly, totally, authentically, unapologetically yourself. Because what happens when they say, oh, I do like you, but you haven't even been yourself, there's this gap, and you're like, well, if they knew the real me though, I don't know if they would see me the same way. And so that actively sits as a barrier between you and that love that you so desperately want to create, and you deserve it, just going about it the wrong way.
Totally.
Well, so you said at one point, I mean, all gold, Christy. And there was one string that I really want to pull on, because as we work with couples who, you know, like both partners want the relationship to work, and absolutely a lack of authenticity, right? The people pleasing, the lack of boundaries, the lack of like transparency, the mask wearing, the shoulds, the programming, like all of it. That's been usually a part of their relationship for a long time. And 100%. It creates this barrier between them that's keeping them from the love they want and deserve. And one of the things that you mentioned is that it takes risk showing up authentically. And that so often is where we see so much resistance come up. Because there's fear, because like it's been this way, they've known me this way, we've like, this is how we've managed and what we expect. If I show up authentically and change things, not only am I gonna rock the boat, but I could lose them. They could not choose me. And so it's like, like how do you support people in moving through the fear, the terror sometimes? Because it's like my whole life could fall apart when it comes to relationship, family, long-term marriages, of like just pivoting into greater authenticity and integrity so they can have greater love, but like really risking so much by doing that when they hadn't started out that way.
You know, you guys, if you would have talked to me a decade ago, I probably would have very confidently told you that one of my top values was certainty. That's how attached I was to everything remaining exactly as it was, so that I didn't have to be afraid. And I'll tell you what that did for me. Nothing. What it did for me was it kept me stuck in my so-called comfort zone of familiarity, which actually kind of sucked. And, you know, when we're in that comfort zone, we can rationalize it. We can justify it and say, well, it could be worse. It's not that bad. I don't know if anybody out there listening has uttered any of these statements, but like, I don't know what might happen if, right? That uncertainty really keeps us stuck. And here's the real situation with the uncertainty is that the magical things, the dreams that you have, the opportunities and possibilities that, you know, your soul is fucking longing for, they're not there in that familiar zone, right? They're not in the comfort zone. They're outside of it. And so as long as you stay protecting yourself in what is known, you know, they do say the devil you know is better and safer than the one you don't know. And so a lot of people do subscribe to that line of thinking, hello, me 10 years ago.
Same.
But it's so limiting, and it stops you from having the dreams come true that your heart is longing for. And so I talk a lot about people feeling stuck. And when I talk about this stuck feeling, it is essentially this knowledge that you are here in this so-called comfort zone, which generally is terribly uncomfortable, but nonetheless, we know what it is. We know what to expect.
It's a known discomfort.
It's a known discomfort. It probably sucks. And we have this vision of what it is that we want to create, this dream, this thing that we feel like, oh, that would just light my fucking soul on fire if I could do that or create that or have that experience. And because we're here and that idea is out there, somewhere out there, we have this tension, right? Because there's this gap. And so it creates this tension where a part of us is like, there's things that I want, but also like I want to stay here where I know what to expect. And so that is what creates that sensation of what I call like feeling stuck. Now, you have some options when you observe that you're feeling stuck, right? You always have choices. And the tricky thing is, and people might come at me at this one, so I'm just going to nip it in the bud right now, is that when you're really in survival mode, you often don't see that you have any choices because safety, essentially dictates that you just stay where you know what's what, right? Instead of risking your ass, putting your ass on the line, you just hold down the fort and hope for the best. Right. Just like you said. And I think too, at the same time, a lot of people think about self-sabotage as something that they're doing to actively get in their way. And this comes back to safety too. So I just wanted to kind of throw that in there as well. It is ultimately about creating safety for yourself. No one's like, I'm going to wake up in the morning, I'm going to fuck things up today. Literally no one. So if that is sort of a recurring pattern and or you're just remaining stuck and don't see a way out, invitation to do this looking at yourself. And I will say, in my relationship, the turning point for me was sort of like this aha, like holy shit moment. I'm the common denominator. And that actually shifted the power away from the things out there that were terrifying and out of my control, like my ex-husband at the time, that despite my very best efforts, I will say, did not work. None of it, was creating any effect. It wasn't actually getting any results as far as improving our relationship. I spent a lot of time hoping, praying, wishing, dreaming, finger pointing, and a bit of venting and complaining, if I'm really honest. And none of that did anything. It literally didn't move the needle one fucking millimeter.
Doesn't.
And I realized at this aha moment, I'm the common denominator. I'm literally part of all of my problems. And I'm also the common denominator in all of potential solutions. And so I did the only thing that at that point I was like, well, shit, like actually, the only thing I can do is change myself.
Yes.
As the only person that I can actually do anything about. So if you're in a relationship where you're at this space of you're feeling really stuck, things really aren't working, maybe you tried couples therapy and that went to hell in a handbasket, whatever the case is, a lot of times it's keeping us focused on the problems and on the things that are outside of ourselves, which is a distraction, right? Tying right back to the start of the conversation.
Right.
The only thing that you can do is focus on shifting yourself, focusing on opportunities, possibilities, solutions that exist. Number one, you probably might need to get out of survival mode thinking so that this can open up, take the blinders off, allow you to see the greater possibilities and not respond from that fear like we talked about, so that you are actually consciously choosing who you want to be and what you want to create. This is you in your power. This is your superpower to show up and say, like, this is the intention that I'm setting. This is the kind of relationship that I want to create. And yes, it might not work out. It might not. It didn't for me. The more I got, to this place where I started taking my power back, the more it became inherently clear that it was not in alignment for me to stay in that relationship. And that was scary as fuck. Like literally the scariest thing that I have ever done. And up until that point, I really was pretty hell-bent on staying and keeping my family together. I had three children. They were young, all under 10. I didn't want to break up my family. There's so much pressure and so much, concern with what that would do and what that would create for them. And staying where I was and teaching them that was normal was also not okay. And so I made that incredibly difficult. It was, I think, the most difficult decision that I have ever made in my entire life to leave, knowing that if I went first, if I was able to model to them what choosing myself and choosing happiness and creating that by leading the way, not by martyring myself to make other people happy, which does not work. I know we've all fucking tried. It doesn't really work. If it does, it's so temporary that it just leaves us in a cycle of frustration, resentment, disappointment, bitterness.
Yes.
So choosing myself, I made that decision. I left. It was absolutely, for me, the best possible outcome because I got that relationship that I truly wanted. And that was worth, I'll tell you, a really dark time in between, but it was worth it in the end, because if I hadn't, I would still probably be there. I don't even know if I could have withstood it, to be honest.
Yeah.
And this is the thing, we are the only ones who are ever going to know when that right moment is, where we just, that's it. I can't do this anymore, and I have to do something differently. We need whatever that spot is for us, and it's going to look different for everybody. We need that spot where we're like, I got to do something different. Otherwise, that comfort zone, again, it sucks, but we know what to expect. And so it's kind of cozy there, despite it being kind of like hell on earth. And its pull to keep us there safe, where what we know is going to happen is already happening. It can really just keep us stuck for a lot longer than we deserve to be stuck.
Right. Yep. Yeah. You know what really strikes me is that the path to happiness, whether your relationship stays or not, is the same, right? Like it starts with you and doing your own work and showing up authentically and taking those risks. And then either you get evidence that your partner is able to like step up and meet you, which is what happened in our relationship, right? Like I was the one who was like, well, I got to stop pointing fingers. I got to change me, or this isn't going to work. And then, but as I did and took more ownership of myself, like Cal stepped in and leveled up, right? And so that worked. And we see that with a lot of our couples.
I've seen that as well.
But either way, like you still have to do that self-work first to either find out if your partner's going to join you, or find out that they're not, and have more clarity
around what you need to do now.
Around what you need for your own happiness.
Yeah. And ultimately it's an exercise in self-discovery that leads you to this place of, well, who the fuck am I? Right. When I was in this terrible, shitty situation, I like to say that I was suffering from what I call very lovingly just abominitis, which really was a term to say that I was a mother and I was a wife, and I didn't know who I was outside of those main roles.
Sure.
I had really lost track of who I was. You know, before I had children, I was a professional accountant. So I had that label. I had value to the external world. And then I became a stay-at-home mom, which I won't go off on this tangent because the patriarchy.
Yeah.
But my value, you know, this validation that I had been receiving from the external world was like immediately gone. Listen, children are not the best source of validation and gratitude.
You're kidding.
I know, you might know this.
Notice that with ours.
You might notice if you're a mom or a dad. And like I said, I just, over this time, started to inquire, who am I? Right? Who am I outside of these roles? Because at some point in life, well, I was hoping I was going to be, you know, that wife role was going to last a little longer, if I'm honest. But at some point I was going to be less involved in those particular points in the journey in those roles. And I just wondered who I was going to be when that was going to be shifting into the next stage. And it was a long ways off, but nonetheless, I felt kind of empty. And again, I think it comes to this stuck feeling because I felt like there was more. There was something missing. And a lot of people go through life thinking something's missing. They think there's something broken or wrong with them. And that's actually, that's not it, right? It's actually just that you're missing the fact that you're already whole, that you are already complete, and that you have absolutely every fucking thing that you need as the unique individual that you are to create the life that is absolutely perfect for you. Not perfect by anybody else's standards, but perfect for you. And so this emptiness, which we misconstrue and think there's something wrong with me, I must be broken, I need endless healing and fixing and all of the things. And now I think healing, I look at healing in a bit of a different way, because a lot of people are sort of on this endless treadmill of constant healing. And yes, I realize that, you know, we're like an onion and there's always another layer. And so if you go down this road from this healing perspective, that there's something to be fixed, something to heal, you will find it, right? Yes. This is to say that journey will never fucking end. And sometimes that can be really exhausting. And so my quick fix, sort of reverse engineer this thing, is to recognize and start with the fact that you're already whole. There is nothing missing from you. There is nothing wrong with you. You're not broken. You don't need fixing. You don't need constant healing as a result. It is actually just this remembrance of your wholeness that you need to step into fully and operate from that place. Now, when you're in that place and you act with, intention, with aligned action from this place of wholeness, you will evolve. And that evolutionary process is much more fun and friendly and positive than this sort of endless seeking the next thing to heal and fix. Right?
Yeah.
So it's a similar journey, but one is driven by like this fear of not being good enough and not being whole and all of this, and it's driven by the fear and the worry of not being completely healed yet. And the other one is driven by the state of completeness and this wholeness and this love that actually takes you off the endless hamster wheel of striving to be better constantly and allows you to simply be the incredible human that you already are. You don't have to become someone else. You just need to be who you already are. Right? You really, you have everything on board. This is the thing. So you can be that version of you now. And then when you are, then the aligned action becomes so much more clear, right? Whether it's staying in your relationship and putting in the effort to, maybe you need to revive some date nights. Maybe you need to sit down and have some difficult conversations. Maybe you need to talk about boundaries because you've learned some things about yourself and realize that, I might have been doing kind of a shitty job at setting some actual boundaries, and learn about how to communicate those in a kind and loving way. And maybe it means making the really difficult decision to part ways in a relationship or redefine the terms of it. And now I'm kind of broadening this, like this could be for any relationship, right? A friendship that's draining you as well could have a lot of these similar outcomes as you're doing this quote unquote work on yourself, which again is not like work in the typical sense of the way people understand the word work. It's really just an exploration, a self-discovery, a learning and an unlearning.
An awareness.
Right? Yeah, and awareness. Because that is really the key to shifting things, is that awareness. Right? We'll operate from patterns for a long time. And when you have that awareness, you're like, oh shit. Like now I'm seeing this thing. And initially people freak out by this new awareness. They're like, oh my God, like I can't believe and I did it again. Like, oh my God, what's wrong with me? I did it again. But this awareness is actually something quite magical if you just stop beating yourself up for a moment, because now you see things from a different perspective. You don't know what you don't know. But now that you are seeing it, even though, yes, it might slap you a few times before you're like, I gotta do something different. This awareness is actually pivotal. And so when people are like, oh my God, I can't believe I just realized that I'm like, this is amazing. I know it doesn't feel amazing to you, because right now you're thinking, oh my gosh, what's wrong with me that I didn't see this until now? But I'm going to just go ahead and say, let's celebrate this present moment, because you are seeing things differently. And now you have the power to change it. And so instead of that guilt and that shame and that focusing on the coulda, woulda, shoulda, which we do a lot as humans, it's kind of our natural go-to. I recommend a little bit of self-compassion. It's a complete game changer and a catalyst to actually creating positive change and transformation in your life. And it can be tricky because we have really been conditioned that vulnerability is weakness and loving ourselves is selfish. And I call bullshit on all of that, because the truth is you cannot love yourself too much. Like, people so worried, like, well, if I love myself too much, I'm going to become arrogant and I'm not going to care about other people and become a narcissist. And I think, okay, sidetrack on the narcissist thing for just a moment. We're not going to spend too much time here. I just really feel like this is an overused term. Everybody has narcissistic tendencies. And so there's a spectrum with that too, just as there is with authenticity, right? There's a spectrum of behaviors. And I actually believe that narcissists are just really hurting people. They don't know how to respond differently. It is about safety for them too. It just looks differently. It's a coping mechanism. And what happens if you are someone who is seeking that validation, you play right into this whole thing and you end up in this very lovely dance. Ask me how I know. With lots of patterns repeating that take, unfortunately, a few times before you're like, what happened? How did I end up here? And what is going on? How do I, remove myself from this situation? But I mean, ultimately, taking back your power is you giving yourself some grace giving yourself some compassion, because the truth is you can't change the past. That's done.
Exactly. Can't
Right?
change a second.
You,
Yeah.
you can't change the future really right now. Now is the only time that you actually have to make change and to do things differently, to show up as the version of yourself that you want to be right here, right now, having this experience of happiness, peace, love, joy, whatever it is that you want to feel. Now is the only time that you can create that.
Yeah.
And so if you consistently push it to, when this happens, I'll be happy. When my partner does this, then I'll be happy.
Yeah.
You are deluding yourself and creating something that will never be fulfilled, because guess what? In the future, it will become now. And if you cannot master how to find it and create it for yourself here and now, that will continue to perpetually keep you from experiencing that which is truly yours to experience.
Exactly. So when people, because you kind of talked about how, so when people get good at this and really embrace and start living from their authenticity, like what can happen for them?
Magic.
Can you have any good like juicy examples of like when you really can crush this, like where like the dark depths you can be in, like what happens when you get good at it?
Oh, well, I mean, some of the things that immediately pop to mind is that you finally feel seen and heard, loved and accepted for who you are. You can literally take down the masks and you feel like you actually fucking belong. And so just a real quick sidebar on fitting in versus belonging, right? Because that's a confusion we often have. Belonging means that you show up as your whole authentic self and people accept you as you are. Whereas fitting in means you're contorting yourself, molding yourself, trying to fit in literally with other people by being like them. So belonging is the sense of being accepted for who you are and finding the people that love your weird ass self, right? Just for who you are. You don't have to pretend to be anyone else. The other things that I would say is that you feel more confident naked, both physically and emotionally. This ties to that vulnerability piece, that willingness to share those weird things. Like, listen, everybody's human. There's a lot of stuff that we normally do and a lot of stuff that we've been really conditioned to hide away, as it's like, oh, we don't talk about sex.
Right.
Oh, we don't really talk about bathroom things. Oh, we don't really talk about periods, right? Like there's all these like weird taboo things that are like every fucking human is dealing with this in some shape or form. Why are we pretending this is some weird thing? And so we, as we do this work and get more comfortable with being our authentic selves, we can feel better naked, which obviously equates to a little bit more space in the bedroom, right? More intimate, more deep conversations, a more connected relationship where you feel like you truly can share all of your thoughts with that person, and without risk of repercussion, right? And that's where the vulnerability piece gets sticky, because if you haven't had the experience of being accepted when you've shared some of these things, when, for example, from personal experience, the other person has not got to that place of emotional intelligence where they can handle difficult emotions. It's really about them, but you can end up shutting down because they're not a safe space. And so this work on yourself actually allows you to be able to discern who is a safe space for you, and also to not get bothered by the people who aren't, and just simply recognize, like, listen, this isn't about me, right? I'm less triggered, as you would say, by anything that anyone else does because I know myself, right? I am less likely to fall into conflict with anybody. And I think it's always interesting these days when somebody, suggests that we're disagreeing about something. I'm like, I mean, we may see it differently, but where's the disagreement? I'm not telling you that you're wrong. I don't have to be right. We can just see things differently because 8.1 billion people on the planet, we're gonna have some people seeing things differently, right?
Differences.
Very different experiences and memories and beliefs and mindsets and all of the things that contribute to where you're literally seeing things from. And so the ability to avoid and navigate difficult conversations, but avoid real conflict is a big thing for sure. That is something, like, my partner and I, we've been together almost 6 years. We have not had a fight. We don't agree on everything because we're two different humans. We sometimes see things differently, and we can have a respectful conversation, because we're driven by love, not fear.
Yeah.
And this creates the space for sharing different perspectives in a safe way, where it's not about attacking the other person because they see things differently, but actually promoting growth and evolution from expanding our perspective by sharing the different ways that we see things.
Exactly. And making space for it. The fact
And
that
making space, absolutely. And just more fun, more happiness, more peace, more love, more joy, more of the things that you want to do. The way I see it, you're like, having this human experience that you literally get to create whatever you want. And if you're not, I invite you to explore that, because the truth is you do get to create, you do have choices. And when you get out of the survival mode, you start to see, holy shit, there are endless possibilities and opportunities available for me to do things and create things and experience things, and really just leaning into the adventure and the journey of this human experience. It's so fun and it's so fascinating.
I love that.
Yeah.
Yes. Oh, Christy, how inspiring, right? Like just listening to the energy of you talk. It's just as like truth bomb after truth bomb after truth bomb, right? Like and so
I've
so
been through some shit,
powerful.
Jenny. I've been through some shit.
I get it.
This
Yeah,
is why I can be here today and share this stuff, because I've been through some stuff, and I've seen two sides of this coin, and it just, I just feel so called, like it's like my part of my purpose and mission, to share what I figured out with other people, whether they take that information and use it. That's, I'm not attached to that. So if anything I've shared here today rubs you the wrong way, or maybe it's intriguing, or something just completely like, holy shit, I've never thought of it that way, or I've never heard that, I just invite you to try it on. Just try on the idea, see what it would mean for you. Play around with it. If it fits, cool, keep wearing it, see what happens. If it doesn't fit, that's okay too. I won't be offended or upset if you think I'm full of shit. It really does not bother me at all, because I have been through some shit already and I know who I am.
That's right. One of the perks of authenticity.
It is totally the perk. And yes, exactly. Not worrying what other people think or have to say. Not letting that throw you off, especially as, if anybody out there owns their own business, we know how tricky that imposter syndrome can be to keep us from expressing ourselves and saying the things and creating the visibility that we truly feel on our hearts to share, so that we can actually make impact in the world. This authenticity piece is going to serve all kinds of relationships, not just, your romantic relationships, but the ones you have with your kids, the ones you have with your parents, the ones that you have with your body, with money, with your business, with your coworkers, with your boss, with your grumpy neighbor, with the trolls on the internet, literally with everything. And so when people say like, oh, well, like, what are the outcomes? Well, literally every fucking thing could be exactly as you dreamed if you start making these shifts from the inside out, because that puts you in the driver's seat, so that you literally can create the experiences that are perfect for you.
Yes. Well, for those who do like resonate with and love everything that Christy is saying, like we do, how can they get in touch with you? How can they work with you? How can they learn more or receive more of this amazing message that you have?
Yeah, I have lots of resources available for people. Of course, my podcast, Create Your Happy, you can find that wherever you listen to or watch podcasts, chock full of nuggets around relationships from an empowering point of view, so that you can actually start taking practical action steps to make it different, like today, or like, right now, right? This now moment. I also have a number of free offerings and courses. I offer one-to-one mentorship in a number of different formats. So depending on where you're at in your journey, I might have a different recommendation for the first step that might be right for you. You can find out a little bit more about me and the things that I offer, as well as my books and my freebies, all on my website at coachchristyholt.com. And the other thing that I was just going to say is that I obviously hang out here on Facebook. So if you want to connect, I would be thrilled to connect with you. And I love to drop little nuggets and bits of information from the podcast onto my social media channels. So if you're on social media and want to follow along, you'll get lots of juicy little ideas and things to try on.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Wonderful.
Sounds
Well,
cool.
thank you again, Christy. This has been so yummy and so fun and so valuable. So valuable.
Yeah. I love it.
So we're really honored.
So aligned too.
Yes.
Like, it's like what we teach, only a different voice, different words.
Yeah. Like slight shift.
Yeah, so good.
But
A little swearier, maybe.
I don't know, that
No.
maybe a little bit more, but not that much.
The F word is my favorite word.
But yeah, like, just really thank you.
Yes.
Thank you so much for us and for everybody and anybody out there who watches this, because it really is such a gift just to be in the energy and receive the reflection of love and enoughness and possibility that awaits people when they like make the courageous decision. This is what we talk about a lot, right? Like, you've got to make that first courageous decision to take the journey.
Yeah, to turn inwards,
right?
On the journey.
And then like the places that you can go, the experiences you can have, just so much more and better than you can even imagine. And you are helping guide people there as well. And it's so needed in our world. It is so needed. So,
extending a permission slip to anyone watching, listening, to take that first step, to, to risk it for the biscuit, if you will.
Yeah.
You are so worth it. You are so deserving of it. Like, you're already worthy of having those dreams come true. So give yourself permission to believe that and act in accordance with that, so that you can actually start creating that. And I just want to say thank you to both of you as well for inviting me to be part of this, expert series and share a little bit of the things that I've picked up along the way. And absolutely, it was completely aligned. So I am grateful for the opportunity to be interviewed as well, and to share some of this, in an interview format, which is always a little bit more fun and flowy, when we have that energy of the conversation going. And so I appreciate you inviting me to be a part of this series, and for the work that you're doing as well, because we share a similar mission to, help people find relationships that make them truly fucking happy. And the truth is, you don't find it out there. You create it from within.
Yep. Awesome.
I love it.
Great place to land.
Yeah, we'll leave it.
Thanks, Christy.
Thank you so much. Have a great Friday.